Hello, I'm Patrick Pacheco. Welcome to this two-part episode of Theater, All the Moving Parts on Musical Biography. First spotlighting A Beautiful Noise, which retells the story of pop phenomenon Neil Diamond. We're joined for that segment by Will Swenson, its acclaimed star, and Tony Award winner Michael Mayer, its director. Then we speak with writer Rick Ellis, who's no stranger to the genre, having co-written the international smash hit Jersey Boys about Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. He later managed to capture the legendary Cher in the musical The Cher Show. Welcome, Will, and welcome, Michael, to Theater All the Moving Parts, and congratulations on a terrific show. I had a wonderful time, and the person that I was with, who's a Neil Diamond fan, was in heaven.
Awesome.
In what way were you intent on creating a show that would appeal to theatergoers who were not that interested in Neil Diamond, such as myself?
Well, I feel like one of the great things about his story and the way we're telling it is that it really is universal. And I think that when you're in the story of someone who is, it's two parts, right? Mm-hmm. One is an older person who is trying to figure out who they are if they can't do the thing that they were put on this earth to do, the thing that defined them for their whole life.
The 82-year-old Neil Diamond, played by Mark Jacoby.
Exactly. And then there's the young Neil, played by young Will Swenson, who is striving to find who he is. Mm-hmm. So both of these stories working in tandem, I think, are incredibly universal, right? Because we all have that question that we're going to be faced at some point in our lives, and we're all trying to aspire to something as we're growing up. And I feel like the songs themselves reveal so much about the character of Neil Diamond in the context of his story, but they're also just fabulous songs. So people who don't really know his music or don't think they're into his music, once they plug into the story and the songs have so much resonance to the story and are so pleasing to listen to, and they're performed so brilliantly, I think it works on both ends.
There's three Neil Diamonds that you play. There's the private Neil Diamond, the public Neil Diamond, and then there's Anthony McCartan's Neil Diamond, the character. Do you see those as three different people that you are called upon to play, Will?
That's a very interesting way of thinking about it. I guess everybody has different versions of themselves. It's been fun in my homework of the role to sort of find those different versions of Neil. Before the show starts every night, I usually, at about half hour, I pull up a YouTube clip, and there's literally thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of clips of Neil doing interviews just like this and doing performances all over the world and documentaries. And so it's really interesting to catch the different versions of him at the peak of his powers on stage and the huge showman, and then sometimes an interview where you can tell he's worn out from the road and he's just kind of going through the motions, and then other times, like a documentary where he's in his groove and talking to his bandmates, and you see this joy, this manager in him. So there's lots of versions of him, and I'm trying to uncover all of those.
Did you come to a point when the two of you had a discussion where you had to sort of leave that Neil Diamond of YouTube videos behind and create the character?
When we were working on it, there were times where we had to be careful not to do too much of an impression. We want to capture the essence of the man. And luckily, this guy is someone that Will has spent so much of his life thinking about and has been a presence for him. And for me as well. But then Anthony did write a story. So we had to adhere to the dramatic incidents as we go through them. And there were times where it needed to be a little more Neil, or a little more Will, or a little more of who Will might have been before he was Will. You know what I mean? Uh-huh. Because you watch this guy from when he's quite young to into middle age.
And what struck you in terms of your research that you discovered about the private Neil Diamond that you didn't know?
I didn't know that he was an introvert, and I think a lot of people still don't know that. When you meet him, he's very, very chill, very soft-spoken, because you're used to this showman that we grew up with, and this brash, bright, energetic, sparkling man. And when you meet him, he's super chill, and that's an interesting combo.
Right.
To have in the same person.
I was struck by that, by your costume designer,
Emilio Sosa.
Emilio Sosa. Exactly. That somebody that you just described, this shy person, could drown in sequins. Where did that come from?
I think that once he started to become a performer, because remember, and this is in the show, he didn't set out to be a performer. He just wanted to be a songwriter.
Right.
And when Ellie Greenwich decided that he had something unique that she thought could sell, he needed, I think, to find a way to bring himself out of his shell, because his innate quality is private. So I think that this was the natural outgrowth of someone who, number one, always saw Elvis Presley as this giant star that he could only aspire to. And then suddenly, Elvis Presley was someone he could compete with. And then Elvis Presley was someone he might actually best at some point, which in fact he did.
Yeah.
And so I think the Elvis glitz, all that lame, all those sequins, I think that was some kind of totem or something he could put on and assume the character of the great entertainer like that.
Did this quantum jump of identity cause him to be neurotic on some level? Did it, the idea somehow that I'm not this person that I'm...
I don't know. I think he saw it as something that he stepped into, much like a drag queen kind of has another persona and kind of steps into this other powerful thing. I think he felt power when he did that, and sequins were an extension of that. He took a lot of heat for wearing the sequins at first, and like the press kind of tore at him a bit for it. And after a while, he said in a couple of different interviews that he did it just to spite them.
Right.
Just like, I'll do what I want. You want to make fun of me, I'll go bigger.
performative. He was performative.
Completely.
Yeah.
It was about this character
Right.
that he was creating.
And Will, how did you feel when you first put on Emilio Sosa's sequin suit?
I mean, like a drag queen? No. No, you do. You feel a certain power. It's a new persona. I mean, you put on some more heels and then
Oh, those shoes, those boots.
the boots are incredible. Yeah. Kevin Adams' lights are shining at you, and you're like a walking mirror ball. It definitely elevates everything that you're doing, for sure.
Michael had said maybe a little bit Neil here, a little bit more Will here, a little bit this is. What does it mean to be a little bit more Will?
Well, I think he means that in the sense that as an actor, you use your own utensils as your tools, the pieces of yourself to plug into the character. And I think we just wanted to make sure to not get into impression or caricature. If you get too far into that, it becomes about, oh, look at that actor doing this sound or this thing, and the story goes away. And we just wanted to focus everything very much on the character and the story, make sure that was first and foremost in our bag of tricks.
Right, and for the emotional truth to be just simple and honest.
And the emotional truth is in the lyrics. It's in the music itself. And also, I gather that that's always been true of your performances as well, whether it's in Hair or in Jerry Springer or wherever else.
Priscilla, when you were a drag queen.
Yeah, maybe that's why it's...
And as a Utah Mormon coming into a Jewish Brooklyn world, how much of a challenge was that for you? What could you rely on?
Well,
Apart from Michael, of course.
as a former Mormon.
Former, I guess
yeah.
a Jack Mormon.
As some say, yeah. I mean, it helped in a way, I think. Neil and I come from, kind of somewhat conservative religious backgrounds and wanted to be this thing that no one could fathom you wanting to do out of your culture. And kind of reaching outside of that circle of comfort and saying, no, I want to be this, and going out and accomplishing that. So I think that's something that I kind of channeled in Neil's journey in this show.
And how did you find the Jewish Brooklyn world to occupy?
I mean, I just
And he was known as the Jewish Elvis.
Jewish
Presley,
Elvis,
right?
Yeah, I mean, again, like YouTube is the greatest tool for an actor if it works, you know. So as far as tracking down the Brooklyn Jewish Neil Diamond, you know, I've tried to find the earliest stuff that I can on him as a person and friends that he grew up with, and it's out there. So it's.
Were you able to help?
I did my best, you know, being a legit Jew and all. I think that it was somewhat helpful, I think, for me to with just my own history and my own complicated relationship to Judaism. With Anthony, I think more than with Will, honestly, just in terms of shaping the story and trying to locate that sort of the generational angst, you know, that historical angst that we all carry with us. That I don't know that that's a particularly Mormon kind of thing.
Not in the same way,
right?
But yeah.
But this, you know, the terror that you walk around with because your people were, you know, evicted from everything, you know, for generation after generation.
Because it's a very important part of the show, as you discussed with the writer,
Yeah.
Anthony McCartney.
Right.
Did he embrace his Jewish roots all the way through his career, through his life?
This is what I know. He never denied his Judaism. I think that the fact that he did The Jazz Singer,
Oh, right.
that
of
was
course.
his big movie, his
right.
one real role as an actor. I don't think it was an accident that was about a musician in a religious Jewish family, and his moving past that was the big conflict of that story. I think he must have related very strongly.
And in working on with Anthony on the development of the show, was there a eureka moment when you looked at each other and said, "We found it. We found the play"?
It was very early on, honestly. We did a reading I got a bunch of actors, and I was real clear. I said, I don't want anyone who could actually play these parts. I don't want singers. I want actors who are good at at developing new work, and I just want to sit and read it. All the song spots weren't even set yet. We read through it, a few lines here and there. They'd pop in. And then I said, what if the ensemble is really what's in Neil's head? And they're not actually people, but they are the embodiment of his emotional life, his history, his hopes, his dreams, his fears, his creativity, the way he hears a song, the way he builds something. Anthony loved that, and from that moment on, suddenly the whole thing lifted, and we realized we had the ability, we could go wherever we needed to in the blink of an eye. We didn't need to set up big scenes with lots of characters coming in and delivering coffee or taking notes or something, you know? Mm-hmm. That's where we thought, oh, this is the special way to tell the story.
A good part of what you said earlier about angst, and you had said it's not quite the way the Mormon angst. How do you define the Jack Mormon or angst that is so much a part of a beautiful?
Well, growing up Mormon, there are certain expectations in your society. A good Mormon boy grows up and he goes on a mission and he comes home and he gets
Which
married.
of course you did.
I did. I served a mission. I came home and got married in the temple and very much loved my upbringing, and it was a very positive, wonderful thing. And there was always a piece of my brain that was just kind of saying, but what's outside of that? And it was a long, kind of drawn out process for me to step away from the church, and I still value that very much as a part of who I am. At the same time, very happy with the path that I've gone through, and in a sort of a parallel way, that's Neil's journey, kind of stepping outside.
And you could apply it to that journey.
Yeah.
Apply those things to it. You know, often an actor meets a role that he perhaps was destined to play. In what way did you find as the director that this is the guy that could play Neil Diamond perhaps more than anybody else?
Well, I will tell you, honestly, I had no idea that Will had any relationship to Neil Diamond at all. So when this concept came to me, I was like, I will say, honestly, I never would have thought of it in a million years. I'm a huge Will Swenson fan. I have been since the first time I saw him, which I think was 110 in the Shade. Is that possible?
Maybe. Possible.
That's when you first saw him.
First saw
And
him.
you had never worked with him before.
Never worked with him. We knew each other socially, but even fairly tangentially, honestly. We never really had a whole conversation, I think, probably. We just have a lot of mutual friends. And, you know, the theater world is so small. But once the name, and they said, oh, he loves Neil Diamond. And suddenly I thought, well, wait. He's gorgeous, talented, great singer, wonderful actor. He's got all this charisma. He still looks really young for as old as he is. And so he could probably do this whole range of this guy. I got super excited by it. But it wasn't until we actually were in the room together that I realized how inevitable that it felt. Once he started singing the songs, I also have to say I didn't know how well you played the guitar either. So that was a real plus too. It was like there was just a lot of information I didn't have. Once we started working on it, it was like lightning struck. It was like this was divine intervention.
A large part, obviously, of the show, the concept is the 82-year-old Neil Diamond talking to a psychoanalyst because his wife says, "You're driving us crazy. Go figure out your mishigas."
Right.
Have you ever been in psychoanalysis, either one of you?
Yes.
Sure.
You have?
Yeah.
Really? Sure. Oh, okay. And could you bring that to the show?
Oh, 100%.
How so?
I mean, kind of rediscovering the ways that you think and the ways that I mean, it's very valuable as an actor, I've found, but more valuable as a human, just to understand the pathways of your brain and how they work and how your mood might not necessarily be what you're experiencing. What
have you discovered about yourself in psychoanalysis?
That I'm nothing. That nothing's that serious and everything's fleeting. I guess I don't know.
What about you?
When I went into it, I was in a bit of a crisis, I think, and through doing that work with the therapist, who was brilliant, and I was in therapy for about 20 years with her. I became a director. I was a struggling actor at the time. So I think that working through all of my mishigas, and believe me, there was plenty to work through, and family drama, and all the stuff that you talk about with a shrink. I think we got to a core idea of who I was, and that was a director, not an actor. So just on a practical level, she changed my life completely.
How did you find that the songs, you mentioned obviously these brilliant songs, these great songs, how did you find that they were the building blocks to tell the story of this man that you wanted to tell? How did they lend themselves to a narrative as opposed to just then I sang this, then I sang that, then I sang that?
Well, it was in that big work session, we just had all the songs there. We had them on Spotify, we had the lyrics, we had songbooks. So it was as we started putting the thing together and thinking about what song might go where, the lyrics themselves would lead us. It was like these brilliant clues. It was a map, really, that told us. So the songs actually dictated to us where they belonged.
Was there a theme song to him? Something that perhaps revealed him more than any other song in the playlist?
I am, I said.
And I'm not a man who likes to swear, but I never cared for the sound of being alone. I am, I sin. To no one near, and no one heard at all, not even the chair.
We saved that for the climax.
And most of the songs are performed. They're presentational. It's rare that there's a book song, so to
Right.
speak, as we know them.
Right.
One of them is Forever in Blue Jeans, right? How did that moment happen? How was that sparked?
We were in a workshop in Queens, right? Yeah, that's when we were in Queens.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, we had a big, full workshop. It was our first time putting anything really all together on its feet. We had done a choreographic project for a week, but this was our real thing. And I was looking at the songs that we hadn't used yet. Stephen Hoggett, our choreographer, had mentioned that he said, "Well, I guess you're not going to use my favorite song." Sorry, Stephen has the worst accent
Yeah,
ever.
you don't sound anything like
I know. Really, like every accent I do ends up sounding Russian. He said, I guess you're not going to put Forever in Blue Jeans in. That's okay. I'll deal with it. I'll survive. And I started thinking, that is a great song, but I don't want to hear Neil sing it.
Yeah.
And that's when I thought, what if Marcia sings it and we have a moment for the women in the show to really give full voice.
Maybe tonight, maybe tonight, by the fire all alone, you and I. Maybe tonight, nothing will wrong but the sound of my heart and my side. Forever in blue jeans, babe.
So this is his second wife,
His second
obviously.
wife, yeah,
and-
Marcia Murphy, right.
And also, I believe it's the breakup song is "You Don't Send Me Flowers."
Yeah,
right?
You Don't Bring Me Flowers.
You don't bring me flowers. Excuse me. Thank you.
And you don't bring me flowers anymore.
It used to be so natural to talk about forever, but used to be.
I found it amusing in sort of researching for this interview that it's your duet with Audra.
Oh.
Right? Which sounds like, I mean, is it sort of like the evil eye? You don't want to ever go there in your own relationship, so we're going to sing it and ward off?
I mean, we did it sort of ironically. We've done it in like cabarets or whenever. Once in a while, I'll pop out at the end of one of her concerts and sing a duet with her. And for a while, we just thought it was funny. We would set it up very pale-faced and just say, this is kind of our song. It kind of represents our energy and our relationship, and we just want to sing it for you. And then we'd sing You Don't Bring Me Flowers. So I guess we probably won't do that anymore.
Probably you can't.
We can't.
No,
It's
yeah.
not quite as funny anymore.
No.
Yeah.
Neil Diamond was very involved, I gather, in the development of this show.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel that he was peering over your shoulder and consequently that might have, stemmed some of your ideas?
I never felt stymied by it, but I did feel a little anxious every now and then. There are a few scenes where he doesn't behave so well in Anthony's version of it. It all has to be slightly truncated and commodified in a way so that the audience can receive it and we can still move on. You don't want to live in anything too long in the show, or it gets bogged down. But every now and then I'd be like, oh God, what's going to happen when he comes and sees it? Is he going to like it when when you say like, or when Marcia says, "I know how you feel about these Hollywood people."
Oh,
You
right.
know, he lives with those Hollywood people still. He's got a place in Malibu, right? Is he gonna object to that? And that made me nervous, but we showed it to him and he embraced it all. He didn't seem to feel like he was overly concerned about protecting an image. What he was most concerned about is that we did not do any disservice to his wives or his family, and
No.
that we were honest, but not mean about them.
Will, was there a moment, obviously I would gather that you were very nervous when you met him or he came into the room and you were going to play him.
Yeah.
What was the moment when you could relax, if ever?
I can tell you, it was the most unbelievable head trip of my entire life, professional or otherwise, to perform as Neil Diamond 10 feet away from Neil Diamond, singing all of his songs, trying to emulate his sound. And it was the craziest thing ever. The first time we did was for a reading, basically just kind of a sit-down reading. And then he came to the workshop. And about 2 or 3 times after he started coming to the run-throughs, one day he just stuck around for a while, and I got to pull up a chair next to him, and I got to just chat with him, just me and him, one-on-one. And we chatted for, I don't know, half hour, 45 minutes. And it was from then on that I felt kind of more cared for. He really went into caretaker mode. He immediately was like, well, what's the sound system like? Are you going to wear in-ear monitors? What are the guitars? How are you protecting your voice? He just immediately kind of went into all the things that he knows a performer has to deal with and the things that can help you succeed or fail. And I felt very protected and that he was looking out for me from that point on. I never felt judged by him. I always felt very supported and like he was happy that I was his guy.
Watching him watch you is a beautiful thing. I mean, he's really, like sometimes he'll close his eyes and he'll just listen, but most of the time he's really in it. And you feel like he's encouraging you. It's almost like, yeah, go get him, kid, go get him. And
Yeah.
it's very cool.
It's very sweet, actually,
Yeah.
because it's almost like he's rooting for himself. in
Yes,
his own
exactly,
Story. It's
yeah.
very sweet.
It's fascinating about what you've just said about his wives, about how protective he is with you, is that that's the show. The show goes from somebody who is so self-involved, I hesitate to use the word narcissistic, but that's just what a performer's life often is, a rock star's life, that has all this attention. And it seems to me that he had arrived at a point in 82, at the age of 82, where he is now in a protective mood. And as you said about psychoanalysis, it's fleeting. So to the extent was a beautiful noise, a cautionary tale to you about fame and attention and everything else.
Maybe a bit. I mean, I haven't thought about it in those terms. What I love about it, one of the many things I love about it, is the two of us on stage at the same time. I love older Neil looking back at younger Neil, and there's that sense of regret or wishing that I had done this, and then at the same time, the younger Neil almost seeing his future and what he's striving for and what he's reaching for, and them just sort of missing each other. I feel like it's really poetic and beautiful, and those things speak to me on a life trajectory way. Just like what would I say to myself if the 82-year-old version of Will? What would he say to me now? I get choked
Right.
up talking.
Yeah,
Deep.
totally.
Last question, what's your favorite song to sing?
It depends on the night. If I have lots of energy, it's Brother Love's Travel and Salvation Show, because that one is fun to knock out of the park.
We have the valley shakes, it's a love, Brother Love's Travel and Salvation Show. We pack up the babies and grab the
And if I don't, it's Solitary Man, because it's
I
very,
knew you were going to say that.
well, it's very simple and still and beautiful, and
Yeah.
it's just the guitar, and I love that.
and I'll be what I am, a solitary man, solitary man.
It's
How
an
about you?
incredible moment. My favorite, well, it depends. I think it's I Am I Said because but there's the whole, I have to say, my favorite thing is the sequence of Brooklyn Roads, America, and Shiloh. That whole sequence that we made was so carefully and delicately woven that every time that it works, I'm always just hugely relieved. But my favorite is probably Holly Holy.
Holly holy, holly holy dream, wanting home.
I just love that. I love the way you sing it, and I love the arrangement.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been
Oh,
a
it's my pleasure.
really
it was so
stimulating
fun.
conversation, and congratulations, and may you have a nice long run. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pat.
Thanks, Patrick. This was awesome.
We are taking a short break. When we return, Rick Ellis of Jersey Boys and the Cher Show tells us how he faced the challenges of the musical biography form. Joining him is Elizabeth Woolman, a CUNY professor, to help us view the genre through a social and historical lens. Welcome back. We are now joined by Rick Ellis and Elizabeth Woolman, who can give us insights into the appeal of the musical biography and why it has become such a commercial staple on Broadway. Welcome to you both. Rick, let's start with you. When you're approached to do a musical biography, what are the first questions that you ask about the project?
Who's in it and what's it about? I think that those are the two crucial questions with this sort of a show, a musical biography. Often, who's in it turns out to be what's in it, meaning the songs. Because, in the theater, in musical theater, certainly, we like to be able to tell a story with compelling characters that will make your hair stand up on the back of your neck and make you thank God for the day you were born. If you can't answer it with Hugh Jackman or Nathan Lane or Barbra Streisand or Idina Menzel or a name like that, you can answer it with 20 names or 25 names, which are song titles that the audience feels are compelling enough to actually come. And I think it's the song titles that forge that connection with the audience and brings them into the theater. If there's a good story, that may be why they come back. But I think in the biosphere, it's not a bad term.
Yes.
In the biosphere, I think who's in it and what's it about it becomes what are the songs we're going to hear. And if that song list is compelling, then it's worth sitting down and figuring out a way to do it.
What raises a red flag for you? Because I'm sure after the success of Jersey Boys, you must have been bombarded with a lot of approaches.
Well, sure, it's show business, so, people tend to want to do something very much like the last thing that was successful. Jersey Boys, of course, was an anomaly in my life and Marshall Brickman's life, the legendary Academy Award-winning screenwriter that I co-wrote the show with, because we had never written a musical, and it seemed like an unlikely thing for us to do, so we did it really just as an excuse to hang out and enjoy each other's company.
What was the high point? The Hall of Fame, selling all those records, pulling Sherry out of the hat? It was all great. But 4 guys under a street lamp, when it was all still ahead of us, the first time we made that sound, our sound, when everything dropped away and all there was the music, that was the best. That's why I'm still out there singing. Like that bunny on TV with the battery. I just keep going and going and going. Chasing the music. Trying to get home.
The idea of the musical biography for that show in particular lent itself to a structure that was super interesting, and it was happening at the same time that The Sopranos was a really big hit on television, and so they had a story that had never been told, but they had also sold 125 million records, and that was a great way in for us.
And do you see red flags being raised at sometimes, Elizabeth, in terms of shows that perhaps probably should not approach the musical biography?
If we're looking at different kinds of familiarity or different kinds of connections to entertainment that will draw people to the theater, you need to have a good catalog. I would say you need to have a good catalog of music. One or two songs, like maybe a one-hit wonder, is not going to resonate enough as somebody like a Carole King or The Temptations or Tina Turner or somebody with a song. Michael Jackson, who has a song catalog. And I would also think that the celebrity in question needs to have an interesting enough story. I mean, you could probably, if we're talking about a bio-musical, we're not fabricating people's lives. So one would hope that a musical built around someone would have taken into consideration their interest. I mean, all of the people who are being depicted in a lot of these musicals are really larger than life in an interesting, compelling way. I mean, even the people, Neil Diamond had a fascinating life.
Certainly, Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons and Cher both had tremendous catalogs that you could then deal with. And, as you said, larger than life personalities. How did the two shows differ in developing them as a writer, Rick?
The Four Seasons created their own songs and then were the recording artists as well.
Think of the places you'll see. Think what a big man you'll be. Now think what the future would be with a poor boy like me.
And Cher is a singer, but she's not a composer. So the songs that Cher is most famous for are songs that she presented, but she didn't create.
If I could turn back time, if I could find a way, I'd take back those words that hurt you.
I think that's a principal difference. When you're watching a story about characters that you're concerned about, the idea of becoming successful when you have skin in the game. I've written this song. We're not going to be a cover band anymore, said the Four Seasons. We're going to present original material. And Cher's route to starting out as a kid with no advantages in life and rubber bands around her shoes, to become, by the time she was 16 or 17, somebody who was a household name, a one-name wonder.
They say our love won't pay the rent before it's earned. Our money's all been spent.
It was a different route because it wasn't through making the songs, but it was in terms of performing the songs that she became famous. And she became famous as a performer rather than a creator. So I took a different approach with her story. I tried to do something, sort of zany that got somewhat less zany over the course of previews and our out of town.
You're mentioning the structure, I think,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And you'd mentioned how important structure was at the top of in your first.
Well, the Four
answer.
Seasons was such a neat thing because the universe gave us a band called the Four Seasons.
Sherry, baby, Sherry, Sherry, baby, Sherry.
We had four guys in the band, and we had sort of a story that was told in 4 acts, essentially, as opposed to the traditional 3-act structure that theater writing usually takes. So we assigned, one day we had the great light bulb moment after speaking to one of the surviving 3 members of the group, that when he said, "Don't listen to the other 2 guys, I'll tell you the way it really happened." He said, "Oh, well, how about we do a Rashomon kind of structure, and everybody gets to have a privileged relationship with the audience, and then immediately is contradicted by the next person coming on."
And the structure for Cher was a television show. It was called The Cher Show.
She's so well known as a variety show performer from the days of the Sonny and Cher television program.
Hey, you're a mask who makes my dreams real. I say that you do. You're out of sight. So feed my soul.
I wanted to do something that was surreal. When we tried it out of town, the audience seemed to be confused by what was surreal and what was actual. And so we became a little bit more literal in terms of the presentation of the show to an actual variety show, which was disappointing for me because I liked the idea of it being a highly charged theatrical presentation. And I'm less interested in doing literal things because, after all, we're not making a documentary. We're making we're making a musical.
It's a very important point. You're not making a documentary, and the story the narrative story has somehow got to have that emotional impact. Elizabeth, how would you place the biomusical within the larger context of the history of Broadway itself? The record companies in present day are trying to exploit their catalogs, and consequently, we're seeing a lot of these biomusicals now.
Yeah.
But they were around previously, weren't they?
Yeah. And that's actually, so I'm currently working on this very thing right now. Starting in the 70s, there used to be these incredible restrictions between what any entertainment company was allowed to own and what it was allowed to then purchase. So for example, like a record company could not also buy a film studio. A film studio could not buy a distribution network of theaters that it would show its films in, for example, right? That very gradually got lifted through the 1970s. So what we see in the 1980s, lots of different companies grew into these global conglomerates, right? And a great many of them started looking to Broadway. There were all these entertainment companies that were trying to figure out ways to make money off of Broadway. And one of the things that has always been super lucrative for entertainment companies are song catalogs or music catalogs. It became an increasingly easy idea for a single company to have a recording artist own their song catalog, a Broadway, connection to Broadway theaters. David Geffen was sort of a pioneer with stuff like this, even before Broadway, even before Disney.
I think you've got to go all the way back to, say,
Sure.
1924, when Irving Berlin built the Music Box Theater on 45th Street specifically to house what were called the Music Box Revues. These were shows where he would take songs from his Broadway musicals, which had run and closed, and to repopularize them. Repurpose is now the verb that we use. But he wanted to repopularize his songs. So he put them in a different context, but essentially invented what we're talking about. They were called revues, but and then he thought, the real smart way to do this is to go out to Hollywood and do it on film. So he made Holiday Inn, he made White Christmas, which were essentially jukebox musicals on film of his big hit songs, so that he would keep selling sheet music, which was how composer, lyricists, who were also their own publishers, like Irving Berlin, made a living.
Before song catalog.
The first jukebox musical I remember going to see, I guess, was Ain't Misbehavin' in 1978.
Every honeybee eats with jealousy. When they see you out with me, I don't blame them. Goodness, no.
I don't blame them either, baby.
Which was a review, but really a jukebox musical. And then the first jukebox musical I worked on was, in the fall, starting in the fall of '82, when I was working in an advertising agency, was My One and Only, which we called the new Gershwin musical. It was the Gershwin heirs who were looking to revivify the copyrights on catalog that was about to become public domain. And the other thing that's important which is not about the theater, but in around '84 or so, when video technology came in and the VHS happened, and suddenly, as a society, we were able to gratify the vast amount of repetition disorder that we all share, because we're all on the spectrum to some degree now. But you used to never be able to see the same movie over and over and over again unless you went to a movie theater and sat there all day long.
Right.
Suddenly, there was technology that enabled you to watch something over and over and over again. And for Broadway, that is part of this jukebox idea.
Right.
That's so fascinating that you bring that up, because I would venture to guess that a lot of the repeat business to the Mamma Mias of the world, of these jukebox musicals, is particularly this thing. I'm sure that there's a lot of audiences that go back over and over again to & Juliet and to MJ.
But you wanna be there, just be there. No one wants to be defeated. Showing how funky, showing your fight. It doesn't matter who's wrong or right, just beat it.
They just continue to go see them again and again, as opposed to a more traditional and narrative musical.
I noticed this actually at A Beautiful Noise, is that there were lots of entire families. Like I could see people who were like sort of clearly grandparents, kids, and parents, like three generations. Which,
Transgenerational.
and on the one hand, you need to introduce these past big hit makers to younger audiences if they're gonna survive, if they're gonna remain. And so I can see not only repeat visitors, but families sort of building new fans. I mean, people attending, building new fans by bringing them, hey, I remember this song, I now want to listen to one of his albums, sort of, or one of her albums,
I think also there's the idea of, it's kind of a primitive form of immersive theater, because because audiences are encouraged in these types of shows to feel as though they can participate as opposed to just spectate.
How do you take advantage of that?
The alchemy of Jersey Boys was that the audience would be cast over the course of the evening as the people in the local club, or the people at Carnegie Hall, or the people at Yankee Stadium. So we cast the audience in all these various roles and enabled them to respond as if they were in those environments. So so you're hearing a response that's like a stadium as opposed to a polite Broadway audience response. They're happy to participate, even if it's just being very, very loud in their appreciation.
What were you going to say,
I
Elizabeth?
was going to say that the Sweet Caroline sing along, like the big audience wide sing along of Sweet Caroline was at A Beautiful Noise was really one of the more in exactly that way. Like it was very clearly like, okay, here is now our time. We are all going to have this great big sing along.
Sweet Caroline, good times never seem so good.
That's what we go to the theater for. And you get to have a socializing experience. You get to see your neighbor. You get to enjoy something with a stranger that you've only had your own context for up to that point. Now the show gives you a universal context for those songs, and that's very gratifying.
What was the bonding moment in the Cher show?
After much debate, I think her coming up out of the floor at the beginning of the show and singing a song that everybody recognizes was super gratifying.
Which song was that?
If I Could Turn Back Time.
Turn back time. If I could find a way, I'd take back those words that hurt you, and you'd stay.
Which sort of served kind of a dramatic purpose, because then, of course, we do turn back time. So it was almost as if it was written for the show. The audience at Cher really wanted to immediately imagine themselves at a Cher concert. After all, she is still out there giving concerts, like Frankie Valli is still out there giving concerts. And that's and part of what the audience wants to experience is something that feels authentic to their recollection and of what those songs were and their connection to what those
That's
songs
a double-edged sword, isn't it? How do you kind of walk that line?
I don't think it's a double-edged sword. I just think you have to respect that. So you deliver the songs in a way that feel authentic. They don't have to actually be authentic, but they have to feel authentic to the memory of the audience when they're hearing it. When you're doing a biography show, I think you need to deliver the songs in a way that at least sounds authentic, feels authentic to the audience, so they don't feel like that there's a bait and switch going on.
Elizabeth, what are the expectations that you walk into a theater with, into a biomusical show that perhaps you don't, into a none?
I think they draw very heavily on some aspect of nostalgia. That's especially the case with jukebox musicals and with biomusicals, is that there are two things going on. First of all, you want to be able to hear the songs that you love. You want to be able to, or maybe learn hear a couple songs that they're not quite as familiar with. I like to learn something. I like to be engaged with the story, which is, again, brings me back to the idea of people being larger than life. You want to learn a little bit about their struggles and their lives and what makes them human and what makes them beloved. And, I think
Relatable.
Relatable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a word that comes from, maybe from television and film more than it comes from theater, but of course that's always what you want. And this nostalgia idea, just to iris out on that for a second, it's, when you bring back Will and Grace and you bring back Night Court, which just came back, or Roseanne and the Connors, the television industry is very much doing the same thing that you're talking about, right? It's ringing a bell for an audience that feels comforted by something that they remember fondly from before.
But then it pushes them forward a little bit or
Yeah.
transports them in a different way. I
That
think it's,
90s show
Yeah.
is now, used to be
The 70s, that's
that
absolutely
70s
right.
show, and now there they are doing that 90s show. The audience in the 90s was feeling that way about the show that was set in the 70s, and now all
Right.
these years later, they're doing it in the 90s. Why? Why would they greenlight that project? It's because this feeling of nostalgia, I think, extends way beyond what the reason that people go to the theater. I think it's what people are looking for on their small screens, on their big screens, and also in
And
the theater.
in the stage.
Yeah.
What is it, Elizabeth, that you most want to convey to your students about the biomusical? What's important for them to understand?
I really am fascinated by the function of industry and the way that industries react to cultural, political, social movements. I like a very big picture, and so I like to explain to them. I mean, again, what I was sort of saying to you at the beginning. I have this is a secret mission. Like, I know we love our art. I know we love to embrace our art, but it is made by human hands in a system that, sort of we not only want to enjoy ourselves and be entertained, but there are a lot of people that want to make money off of this, and I think both of those things are really important to understand and to look at. So it feels a little bit cynical, but I'm sort of interested in trying to unpack the many ways.
Well,
as
there's no formula.
Yeah,
It's,
there's-
it's an art
yeah.
form. It's not a science. So there's no formula. If you try to follow a formula or impose a formula on it, you're doomed to failure. If I approach a project cynically, or someone comes to me with a cynical like, "Hey, let's make some money off of this thing," I run screaming out of the room. That's a very, very bad idea. On behalf of the people who make the shows, I think the shows that are successful are shows that come from a place of real passion about the material. And that is the opposite of cynicism. I don't want our overview to be only about
Who makes money.
people who are interested in monetizing song catalogs, because those aren't the people who make the shows. People who make the shows work really, really hard to try to find a really good way to tell a story in a compelling way.
That's a mountain you've got to climb, because what Elizabeth has talked about kind of brings critics in with a jaundiced
Yes.
view. That it's to be monetized. So in a way,
That's an assumed view, though.
Yeah, by the critics.
They're assuming a cynical attitude towards the creation of the show. But I can tell you, as somebody who's been in the trenches a few times on these types of things, as well as in things that have nothing to do with musical biography bent or a jukebox musical bent, you have to burn to do this, because it's really, really hard and it takes a really, really long time, and you don't get paid anything to do them until they're on and if they're successful. So it's quite possible to spend 5 years of your life doing something that will open and close, or doing something that will never even get a chance to get to Broadway. And the only way you do that is not with people throwing money at you, because
Yeah.
it doesn't happen anyway. You do it because you burn to tell it, and that's passion, and that's super important.
My home institution at CUNY at City is Baruch College, which is the business school. And so I do have I have super passionate students. I don't mean to, and we certainly have a great deal of fun talking about artistic creation. It's not like I spend a lot of time saying, like, you must not enjoy this, it's all about money. That's not, but it's important to know that there are lots and lots of devoted, passionate people. There are people who are, you're right, like who burn
looking
to
at
go into
one.
this. It's not just like Disney magic. Like there's a machine
These things
behind
don't
it.
just
Like,
happen.
That's right.
And
like
Disney
there's,
is not a monolith either.
Right.
That's a group of people who are really devoted to
And also passionate,
doing what
absolutely.
they do. And there is great passion and need to do it. The theater
Producers
for
too,
me
yeah.
is life. I grew up here. I started going to the theater. God bless my parents for taking me when tickets were 90 cents and cheaper than a movie. I grew up here going to see plays in New York and musicals in New York because they were affordable for us to see, and I fell in love with the genre, and I've devoted 45 years of my life to it. You don't do that because of the imagining a big payday. You do it because you feel like there's nothing else that you can do. Sometimes you get it right, and sometimes, with the best will in the world, sometimes you swing and you miss. But and hopefully you get a chance to do it again with another story.
Well, Burning Desire is probably a good note to end on our discussion on. Thank you so much for participating. You shed a lot of light on a fascinating topic.
Well, thank you very much. May more light be shed on all your shows and all your topics, because it's wonderful that you do this series.
Thank you, Rick. And thank you,
Thank
Elizabeth.
you. Thanks very much for having us. It was fun.
And thank you for joining us. We look forward to bringing you more fascinating conversations with artists and thought leaders as New York theater, The Fabulous Invalid, regains its invaluable place in American culture. I'm Patrick Pacheco.